Hello and welcome to the Fire in the Belly show. Today we have myself, Mighty Pete, and we are joined by Tamara Zoner. Good afternoon to you. No, we're morning. Where are we going?
It's still morning here.
There we go. So good morning, Tamara. How are we getting on?
Great, Pete. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Listen, it's great to have you on the show. So tell us, who are you, what do you do, and where are you from?
Okay, I love those open questions because I have different ways of answering them. When someone asks me, who am I like to take a different route and say, I am a lover of life. I am enthusiastic and energetic. I am a conscious growth mindset person. I am also a mother of three beautiful beings. I am a speaker, a happiness trainer, a coach, and I'm a light. That is who I am.
Define light for us.
So I bring light into the room, into the situation, into the environment. And I didn't always accept this and be able to say this so confidently. And I've been here a few years now and have noticed that I make an impact when I am around other people. And so they will start to see things differently just by being in my presence or with a few minor encouraging words from me, and start to bring light into their own experience or bring light to a situation or simply bring more energy and light into their current moment.
Okay, this is going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to this now. So tell me, is this, I'm going to go off the deep end here.
Sure.
Is this like a light source, or is it more channeling / medium style?
Yeah, that's a great question that I've never even considered. I think it really comes from this place within that my grandmother called me, or my grandfather called me bright eyes. My mom called me sunshine. It's just always been this natural sunniness about me, which I also witnessed in my own grandmother, who I grew up next door to. And I would see how people responded to her and how her energy could shift their moods in the room, and thought, wow, I want to be like that in the world. And so for a long time, my goal was to be like my grandma Marion and touch people the way she touched them. And then I realized I don't have to be her. I have to be me and bring it in the way that I bring it. And I wasn't that confident when I first sort of started recognize it and purposefully doing it. And then over the years, running meetup groups or coaching, would see the impact that I made. And then people would start to tell me, oh, you light up the room. Oh, it's different when you're here. And so I started to own it. And then in owning it, I can actually utilize it more purposefully to actually consciously walk into a room with the energy that I desire that group of people to have.
Wow. Okay. So that's not just receiver mode. That's a two-way transmission thing.
Oh, for
That's
sure. Yes.
sensing of energy and potentially sort of adjusting of energy, let's say, or
It's
emission
almost
of
like
energy.
running through a filter, right? And so I'm this filter, and I'll take whatever the energy is in and then put it out brighter, lighter, warmer, more loving.
Wow. You're like a human amplifier. I love that.
Yes, yes,
Oh,
I am.
perfect. I love it. I love it. So tell me, I mean, do you, again, we're sort of, yeah, why not? We'll go straight in here. In terms of, I mean, do you see energy? Do you feel energy? Where do you sit there?
I definitely feel energy. I don't see energy. I have tried on occasion to see if I could see auras and whatnot. And I do believe that's possible, and it hasn't happened for me. But I can definitely sense energy. And, it takes practice to discover or be able to recognize if it's my energy or their energy and where the difference is. So I don't like to use the word empath because I think it gets abused. And I like to notice energy and then simply, again, try to turn on that filter and allow people to come up, because we see better the brighter it is, right? So yeah, I don't see energy, but I definitely feel it.
Talk to me about the empath comment there. That's quite interesting.
Okay, so it's used a lot, right? I'm an empath, I'm an empath. And what I see in a lot of people is that they use it as an excuse to stay in their suffering. So they'll say, oh, well, I can't go into this situation because I'm an empath and I'll just take it all in. Instead of creating healthy boundaries for themselves, or making sure they're cleaning up their energy as they go so that those things don't stick to them. So I had one person who worked for me when I was working in senior living, and senior living can be very hard, right? They're old, really, really old. And so they pass away, and you have to, working in that environment, learn how to handle that. And she couldn't really. She was like, it's too hard for me. There's too much death. It's like I feel everything. There's too much sickness. And I said, well, what if you utilized that instead to practice cleaning up your own energy and making sure it doesn't stick? And that wasn't something that was possible for her at the time. So she ended up leaving the role. But I hear it all the time. I'm an empath. I can't handle that. So, and when we're practicing empathy, I love this example, and I can't recall where I first heard it, but there's a difference between empathy and sympathy, right? If you, Pete, fall into a hole and you can't climb out, with sympathy, I'm going to jump down in that hole with you, and then we're both stuck. And that's what most empaths actually are doing. But when we practice empathy, we don't get stuck down in the hole ourselves. We throw down a ladder so that we can both get back out. And that is what really being an empath is. It's being able to, sense that you're having an emotional experience and not having it become mine.
What I'm getting here is it's almost very similar to almost the definition of coach and mentor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Tell me more.
Just in terms of, a coach is sitting with you. We may or may not have done it, but we'll sit through you, we'll work through the process, and we're both in the trenches together type thing, and we'll find a way. Whereas typically a mentor is coming from a place of experience, or sort of experience could be, or knowledge, etc. And they are very much kind of guiding and saying, this is your options. It's more of a bird's eye view of more of a, help from the hill as opposed to down in the trench. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And a coach is still going to be the one to toss the ladder, because we're going to ask you, well, how do you think is the best way for you to get out? What could you do differently so that you're not stuck in this situation again? We're not just going to be like, oh yeah, this sucks.
Wow. No, I get it. I do get it. Take us, tell us, you've mentioned there a couple of times that obviously it wasn't always like this, I take it. So this has been a bit of a journey for you. So talk to us about that.
I started fairly strong in my teenage years, really exploring the paths that I wanted to take. And I'm unique in the way that I can witness something I don't like. For instance, as a child growing up, I haven't just repeated the cycles of my parents. I've started new ones. So, my family life when I was a child was a bit chaotic. There was a lot of fighting, and my mom had some mental illness struggles with depression, and fortunately she came to recognize that and get help, and she's solid now. And then getting out of this chaotic environment was where I started to really heal and grow and become stronger as an adult and human being. And then I had a bad, sort of confusing breakup, and I found what probably should have been a rebound, but ended up in a 15-year marriage. And it was the perfect cycle of abuse, which I kicked myself when I used to kick myself for not recognizing it, because that's what I studied at university. And so, you know, it was this perfect, he was French, it was charming and smart and worldly, and I was this farm girl from Michigan who didn't even have a passport yet. And he, you know, took me to Europe. We didn't get to Ireland, but Scotland and London and Paris and Switzerland, and then said, you know, a few months into our dating relationship, said, well, I have to move to Singapore for my job. We have to get married if you want to come. I said, okay. So it was an easy turning of the page for me to just go out of this confusion and I don't know what to do with my life and into this new adventure. And so what I realized over the coming years was that he was very controlling, very manipulative, a high functioning alcoholic, and slowly beat down what confidence I had gained through college, university. And at some point, I just felt very stuck and didn't want to be divorced. My parents have been married for 55 or 56 years now, so divorce was not an option for me at that time. And so I started seeking instead. I started trying different ways. How could, you know, I discovered the law of attraction, and I thought, well, if I can raise my vibration, then he'll come along with me. And that didn't happen. And then we tried marriage counseling, and they told me I had postpartum depression and put me on antidepressants. And then, you know, I tried being the Stepford wife, trying to like have the house clean and the babies quiet when he got home. I had two daughters 15 months apart. So, you know, and have an aperitif waiting for him so that when he'd come in from work, there'd be no stress and he'd be nice. And then when I realized that wasn't working, nothing was working, he was still just kind of a mean person. I decided to leave and then found out I was pregnant with our third child. And so said, I don't want to be a single mother to 3 kids. So, oh my gosh. So then we ended up actually moving to England, and not having family around, not having friends around, being brand new again, I did deeper seeking and really started delving into universal laws and who I am. And I had discovered something called the passion test through a woman I met at a networking event in the States. And you know, when you know something, like she showed me her business card and I read certified passion test facilitator, and I had this whole body something, awareness, chill come over me. And I didn't know what those words meant, but I knew they meant something for me. And so I followed that path. I just followed the breadcrumbs, and she took me through the passion test, and I decided I wanted to be certified in this method, which is what started me on my coaching journey. I wanted to also be a coach and not just have this one skill. So then I did a coaching course while I was in England, and then flew to Norway to do a 4-day certification with the passion test. And the founder of the passion test, Janet Ray Atwood, was there, and she trained us, and it was deep, intense, personal work and truth telling. And she talked about this word, authentic and authenticity. And I thought, I don't know what that means. You know, for me, I know what authentic antique furniture is, but I don't know what an authentic Tamara looks like anymore, because I've covered her up with so many layers of trying to please this man who cannot be pleased, that I, you know, had this epiphany that I had just been lying to myself for so many years, that he wasn't going to change. And I'm a relentless optimist, so that is very hard for me to accept. I'm this good influence on everyone in my life, but no influence on him. That's how it felt. And so through the passion test, you really dig deep and write down a list of things you want to be, do, feel, or have in your life. And I wanted to be authentic, and I wanted a happy, harmonious family life. And I don't remember the other ones that I chose, but I remember those two specifically for my first big passion test, top 5 passions. And then you learn how to align your life with those things. So you learn this formula of basically creating a life you love by choosing in favor of these things that you've now uncovered as the most important things in your life. And so I went home and started to take action. And I still was not thinking divorce. I still was thinking, okay, I will start moving toward these things and he'll come with me. And he never did. And so the same year I did the certification for the passion test, I came back to Michigan for a visit. It was the first time in 2 years. It was the first time I traveled with the kids without him, and got home, and after a few days found myself relaxing. I wasn't bracing for the next, insult, or the next bout of silent treatment, or the next, okay, Pink Floyd's playing, he's really drunk, just stay away from him. I was surrounded by people who loved me and who actually treated me that way. And it was heart opening and mind expanding. And I decided to practice on my friends and family, and I gave the passion test workshop to them. And there's this part right before they make their list that I say, okay, this is where you write it all down. This is where you make your list of 10 to 12 things. This is where you let yourself dream back to those dreams you may have set aside when you were a little kid for more reasonable things, the things you want in your heart of hearts that maybe you're even embarrassed to tell your closest friends, but that's what you want in your life. Maybe you want to be a rock star or a best-selling author, or simply feel good in your body and have more energy. Doesn't matter what it is, you can have anything you want, but this is not where you settle. So you shoot for the stars. And those words, when I said, this is not where you settle, like something inside me cracked open. And as I'm still speaking to them, my brain is saying, you're settling, Tam. You are settling. You are not doing what you're telling them to do. You are not living that life. You're still trying to convince yourself that this marriage is an okay place to be when it's not. It's not safe. It's not healthy. It's killing you. And so in that moment, I decided to start walking my talk. It was just like, this is it. I'm safe. I'm thousands of miles away. I can make a new choice, and I can speak my voice, which had been so silenced for so long. And that's what I did. So it wasn't an immediate thing, but I told my husband I needed some time, that I was far enough now to have some clear vision, and there were things that needed to change if he wanted to make this marriage work. I gave him several opportunities because, like I mentioned, I'm a relentless optimist, and he didn't follow through. He couldn't. I don't think he can. I don't think he has the consciousness to be able to, and that's okay, because he's still an amazing teacher for me. And that's how I try to look at him, as this amazing teacher who reminds me to be authentic, who reminds me to strengthen my pause button so that I'm responding, not reacting. And then from there, I stayed home in Michigan with my kids and started coaching and started a meetup. I don't know if you're familiar with meetup.com, but it brings all sorts of people together who have similar hobbies or things they love to do or want to explore. And so I started a meetup called Create a Life You Love, because as cool and loyal and loving and supportive as my family is, they don't necessarily think the way that I do. It's like life happens to you, so you just got to get through it and do what you have to do. And I'm saying, yeah, no, I happen to life, and I'm going to choose it, and I'm going to decide what it looks like, and then I'm going to go for it. So I knew that that's a hard thing to do, especially on your own. So I made this meetup so I could draw in the people who also wanted to do that, who also wanted to consciously create a life that they love, so that we could kind of do it together and support one another. And for me, it was keeping my eye on the goal of continuous growth and evolution within myself. And so running that meetup really was the catalyst for my confidence growing so strong, because I would see through them like the beautiful positive changes that they made in their lives, and they'd come back happier. And then I'd notice they'd catch themselves when they were speaking rudely to themselves or about themselves. And they'd look at me and they'd be like, oh, I'm mean because I lovingly and gently correct people in their self-talk so that it becomes more supportive, because it's what I had to do for me. I had to remove my ex-husband out of my head and put my own voice back in. And that was a kind, loving, compassionate voice, which is what I wish for all people. And so that's part of what I teach and train people on, is how to change your self-talk, because that will change your whole world. And it changed mine. And so confidence has just grown from there. And then I wasn't making the amount of money I needed to make from that at that point to support my family. And so I followed my heart, and I just followed intuition, and I had applied for some jobs, and someone called me for an interview and I had no idea what it was. And it was just down the street from my house, and it was a senior living community. And it was part-time, so I could still put my child on the bus in the morning to go to school. And I found that I loved it. I loved working with seniors, and I was in activities. And so it was just really fun to show up and play games with them or sing with them, do a sing along. And then about 9 months after I took that job, a friend of mine from high school, well, actually from kindergarten, we met in kindergarten, called me up and said, hey, I have the perfect job for you. And it was a full-time director of life enrichment at another senior community a little further away. And I thought, I don't know if I want a full-time job. I want to grow my coaching business. I want to keep doing this. I want to eventually be speaking full-time. And it'd be nice not to be struggling for a paycheck. So I went for the interview just to see, because if a door opens, I'll check it out. I'll peek through and see what's there. And I went in there and I loved it. And they asked me why I was interested in seniors. And I started talking about my grandmother again. And the love of her always shines through. Like, no matter who I talk to, they're like, wow, you really love your grandma. Yes, I really loved my grandma. She's my favorite human of all time. And they offered me the job the next day. So I thought, okay, yes, I would like to live more comfortably. I would like to provide more easily for my children. And this will help me gain the skills that I need to eventually do what I want to be doing full time, to do not only what I want to be doing, but what I feel called to do in this world, which is to speak and teach people how to take ownership of their lives and their happiness and their joy, and create the meaning that they want in their lives. And so just over the course of these last, now it's been nearly 8 years, so about 7.5 years, my confidence has grown simply because of the results that I see, even by my mere presence, even if I'm not someone's actual coach, even if I'm not trying to help them get somewhere. What happens is, by my mere presence, they shift. And now I left my job in senior living in October to do speaking and coaching and training full time. And now I actually go back to the same senior community that I worked at for 4 years and run a happiness circle. And when I walk in those doors now, they all say to me, oh, your replacement is fabulous. She's really nice. We love her. There's just something about you. They recognize me by my laugh. It's like a moth to a flame. I can't even say for sure what it is. I just know that I've been told enough now that I have this light, and I believe them. I'm not going to argue with them. I'm going to let it shine.
That's beautiful. I mean, well, there's so much there. There really is. Talk to me about that sort of inversion of energy, the change in polarity, and with your husband, and that sort of deciding that one, it was an energy expense, and then flipping it around to becoming an energy profit center, if you like, that actually it could serve you, and talk to me through that process, if you would.
Sure. I feel like it became sort of trying to think of a good metaphor. almost like a thermostat. Like no matter what I did, he stayed at the same temperature. And so I got to actually start recognizing that it really didn't matter if he changed or not. It mattered how my response to him changed. So he became almost a testing point for me, especially as I left and asked for a divorce. And then, we still have 3 kids together. So there's obviously still has to be communication. And for the first couple of years, I invited some trusted friends. One was my lawyer and another was another good friend from school, who I just said, okay, I need to learn how to respond differently because I don't want to be pulled into his tornado. I want to stay calm over here for my children. And I don't want to, I had read about toxic relationships and narcissistic relationships and abusive relationships and what it's like an addiction. So our brains get hooked on the drama, and the only way we can free ourselves of it is to back away from it. So I started using him as kind of the beacon of where I was. Okay, he said this rude, insulting thing. And how did I respond? How did my body respond? And then what thoughts did I think? And so it was this slow progression of deeper awareness until I finally realized that, okay, I am now in fact responding, not reacting. I can take a moment, I can take a day, I can write what I think is a good, clear response, and then have my friends check and see where I'm still not actually seeing what else needs to be cleaned up. And they were like the most amazing people for that. I would literally copy and paste text in a chat to them, and they would say, okay, here's where you're still attacking, here's where you're still aggressive or passive aggressive. Okay. And I don't mind being called on my BS. I actually love it, I appreciate it, I want it, because I BS'd myself for so long. I couldn't see my truth. And now it's all I want. It's all I want. I want the glass to be clear between me and any other person I'm communicating with. And I know that I'm human. It took me a while to learn that. I went through a phase of thinking I wasn't, and that I could, I could do it all, and I could be perfect and be like a saint. And that's not possible. And I have great friends. I have the most amazing friends now that I can have them again. And he said, you're only human. It's okay, be human. And I thought, oh, you're right. Okay. I'm setting exceptionally high circumstances for myself because I disappointed myself for so very long. Now it's time to find this middle. And so my ex is still this beautiful, fabulous, wonderful, very crystal clear beaker of my own evolution, because he hasn't actually changed. He's gotten quieter. He doesn't try to upset me anymore because there's just no point. And the things that he says, I can say, ooh, 5 years ago, even 2 years ago, that would have really triggered me. That would have put me in a for a couple of days. And now it's really, I'm just an observer, and I'm like, oh, okay, he said that. Yeah, I feel some things. So I'm going to wait to respond, and I'm going to work it out. But I don't have to go to anybody else now, because through this process, I've learned to trust my own voice and my own awareness of where it lands in my body and where it takes my thoughts, and how maybe I'll respond differently to people I love just because I'm, thinking of this thing he said. And so I almost wish for everyone to have a really big jerk in their lives to be this barometer of growth, because it's magical. And I wouldn't trade a single moment for the world, because as bad as it was sometimes, and as much healing as I had to come through, I love who I am today, and I can share this gift with other people and inspire them to also take ownership. And it doesn't have to be nearly as extreme. They don't have to, be stuck in a marriage that is toxic. They could be stuck in a job they don't really like and think that that's all there is. So it's big and little opportunities for simply recognizing where I'm at and how everything that I've gone through and continue to grow through supports me and my children, who are, of course, the most important beings in the world to me. So I know for sure that if I don't do my inner work and keep cleaning up my inner space, then I'm polluting theirs. And I never, ever want that. I want them to come in as clean as they can and grow up with the tools. I can't make them use them, but I can give them this beautiful, fabulous toolbox and show them and demonstrate. That's why in my bio, I say I'm a show and not tell mom, because I show them what self-care looks like. I show them what self-love looks like. When my son was 3 years old, that was in the crux of me trying to just fix things and fix me. That was when we were in England. And I started doing yoga again. And I was angry at that time. I was a really angry person, but I couldn't take it out on my husband because that wasn't safe. So it came out on my kids. And I was also in this part of my own personal growth where I recognized that it was more BS, that there was no reason I should be yelling at my kids, that it was a programmed response from my own childhood coming out. And I didn't want to be that parent and I needed to change things. So I started doing yoga daily. And my kids would come in and want my attention or want breakfast or whatever. And I would say, okay, you can join me or watch. And I'm going to do this because you're going to have a nicer mommy if I do. And once they saw evidence of that, I stopped yelling. Our relationships shifted. They don't even remember the mom that yelled. And they witness that I still do yoga every single day. And now my son's 11. So they see the power of self-care in the way that I parent them and the way that I show up for them and the way that I honor who they are as unique individuals and not try to just put them in a box altogether and say, this is how I parent. But no, this is how I parent you. This is how I parent you. And this is how I parent you. It's pretty similar, but each child is unique and each environment is unique and each client is unique. And so I can adapt to what the people that I'm serving need while staying who I am. I no longer have to bend or change for the comfort of others. I show up as I am and give them permission to do the same.
Okay. Are you clear? Because I mean, you mentioned there through the marriage counseling, you mentioned there about the postpartum depression, if I remember correctly, and how that was almost labeled upon you. Are you clear how that bit happened?
There was a lot happening at that time. So my first daughter was born in Singapore. We lived in Singapore. When she was 4 months old, we moved back to my home, Michigan, but not hometown. So the other side of the state, we moved to Grand Rapids. And 3 months after we moved back, when my daughter was 7 months old, I discovered I was pregnant again. So reverse culture shock, new parenthood upon new parenthood. My husband now not traveling, which often gave me a breather, and was just there all the time. And it was very overwhelming. And so he thought I was just crazy. I mean, but this was gaslighting throughout the marriage, right? So I'm crazy and I'm a mess and the house should be clean and there's no reason the babies shouldn't be bathed and quiet by the time I get home. And so I started saying, I can't do this. Like, I want to leave. And so he said, well, let's get counseling. And so we did. And he gaslighted the counselor, you know, it's her. Really, I did probably need antidepressants, but I don't believe that it was because of postpartum depression. Yes, that was definitely a really hard adjustment to have 2 babies in 15 months. But what was harder was a husband who couldn't accept what having babies meant and looked like and expected perfection, you know, with chaos. So, because babies are chaos, they're the best kind, but the house is messy, you're exhausted, you know. And so what I needed the antidepressants for was to deal with him putting so much unrealistic pressure on me and all these expectations. And so I went on them for a while, and then within a year I weaned myself off. And it wasn't a high dose. It was, so I don't recommend anyone weans themselves off without talking to their own doctors. And I did. I basically just told mine, this is the smallest dose you give to anybody. I don't think I really need it. If I did, it served a purpose and I'm ready to come back off of it. I ended up being on it throughout my 3rd pregnancy, in fact. And that could be why my son is just the most magical being on earth. I don't know. I used to joke that with all the cortisol in my blood, he could have been a serial killer, but he in fact is just such a light, and he's so easy and sweet. I definitely feel that some postpartum depression may have been at play, but there was a bigger piece, and that was simply not having a loving, caring, understanding, empathetic partner who wasn't much of a co-parent either. You know, he would play with the kids and should say, sure, go to Starbucks for an hour, but he didn't parent the kids. And that was the hardest part. That was so hard. So I don't think it was anything in my biochemistry that really needed to be adjusted. It was the relationship that did.
You know, it's interesting because I don't know. I mean, I've had depression twice in my life, and my takeaway has been that, you know, depression is actually a symptom, not a cause. And just, you know, as you were talking about it there, as you say, it's let's medicate the symptom. You know, that's going to help.
Yes.
Yes. And then not spotting that actually, yeah, that's kind of, yeah, that's like, you know, sort of waiting without taking out the root, right? It's just kind of going.
Exactly, which I think we, you know, this, especially in the United States, doctors do. Oh, you feel down, here, take some meds, instead of you feel down. Well, first, let's look at these areas of your life and try this first, you know, and then if it doesn't work, then maybe it is biochemistry. Maybe we do need some meds. I'm okay with that. And not before we look at what your life looks like, you know, and or just jumping to that conclusion, which is easy for counselors or therapists or doctors. It's easy. And our medical culture is, let's take the easy route. So, because dealing with the root, not the route or root, dealing with the root, I mean, it can be really hard to dig some of those roots up, right? You know, weeds are amazing. Thistle plants, those roots are serious. You have to basically dig up a foot down. And medical professionals don't always want to do that. And certainly my husband didn't. So it was, oh no, she's crazy. She's got postpartum depression. Fix her, please. And then this will all be better. So.
Bit of a change here, but have you been this version of yourself before?
In childhood, I would say right in this magical part when you're coming out of sponge mode, you know, 0 to 7, and really starting to look around. I remember running around, singing all of the time, and just checking on people. How are you? And you know, like most children are, this naturally light, sunny being before the world layers on the gunk. And And so, yes, I feel very much that I've returned to that cleaner, crisper version of myself that I came into this world as and to be. And my spiritual belief is that, yes, life is full of tests, challenges, and opportunities to shower, shower off the dirt, shower off the gunk, start to, like, how strong are you? Can you become aware of your programming and then break through it? Can you remember why you came here in the first place? Can you remember what you wanted to learn or how you wanted to grow so that you can actually do it? And I feel like I'm in this phase of remembering. Now I remember this last 7 years. And I love this cycle of 7, because it's like 0 to 7, you're this little sponge. 7 to 14, you're growing, your brain is changing, you're becoming an adult. And then the cycle goes on. And now for me, it's been 7 years, a little over, since, that was all major growth and learning and deprogramming. And now I can't wait to see these next 7 years, because now I am who I am. And I have just catapulted this last year into, oh yes, I am being who I am, and this feels really good. And the more I do that, the more life unfolds in this beautiful, magical way, and synchronicity occurs, and people show up to help, and they just want to help. Mentors come out and say, oh, I'd love to show you how to do this. Here's how, and it's just, and literally mentors, who, you interviewed John Davis, corporate action hero. I met him when I worked for the senior living community at a corporate event, and was just in awe of this cool guy with his nunchucks and whips and on stage with his presence, and thought, man, I want to be doing not necessarily the nunchucks thing, but I want to be on a stage talking to a big group of people. And I remember introducing myself to him later, but he has a whole different version of meeting me, and he remembered me. And I was like, you remember me? I was just one of about, 600 people that day. And so, he shared this beautiful story of how I walked into the breakout room where other people had sat down and were all kind of like heads down and waiting. And I walked in, and he said, it's like a bright light came on and everybody sat up and looked up and started talking. And then I changed the energy of the room. And I was thinking, wow, I had no idea. I had no idea that I did that to that room. And I had no idea that I made that impression on someone who I found to be like this amazing, well-accomplished speaker that I looked up to, because that's where I want to be. And so now we're doing a podcast together. And now he's like, okay, here's how we're going to get you to the next level. And here's what you need to tweak on your website. And, here's the vocabulary that will attract the audiences you're wanting to attract. And it's so cool. And I just sit back and go, he just wants to help me, because first of all, he's a really awesome human being. And second of all, he sees this light that people see. And okay, yes, I own it. I've got it. I'm going to share it.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, it's so powerful, and especially when you connect with people on that level, it's yeah. I mean, it is another level. I think that's the only way to put it, right? It's one of service and one of love, and yeah, it just doesn't. I don't know. It is next level.
Yes, it is. And that's like that magic level. Like, things just start to open up for us when we're being of service, and also of service to ourselves, so that we can actually be of service. So I try to like catch people in that, because people think, oh, I'm supposed to be of service. Like, that's what a good religious person does, or that's what a good human does. So I have to be of service. And so they give and give and give and give of themselves, but then they crack and break down and burn out. And so we have to be of service to this vessel first, before we can even be of service to others. So that's, again, why I come back to self-care. Self-care, self-care. Self-care is the action of self-love. And when we take care of ourselves, we are of more service, of greater service to others, because we're bringing our fullness to the experience instead of just barely having anything left. I like to, use my glass of water always as an example. If you pour it out and pour it out and pour it out, eventually it's empty and you're probably going to drop it and it's going to break. But if you fill it until it overflows and you give from the overflow, then you never run out. You always have more to give, and you are also filled up and well.
Are you the water or are you the glass?
Oh, good question. Oh, we're the water. This body is the glass, but this spirit is the water.
Love it. I've noticed your language changes slightly.
Okay.
There's certain areas you're very auditory based, auditory bias. It's all about the sounds and all about, that. And then it switches to visionary, so visual. It's very interesting the way it's sort of, depending on what you're talking about. Yeah, I don't know. Does that make any sense?
I mean, it does. I haven't really paid attention, so it's interesting to hear.
Yeah, I don't know, because I'm fascinated by words and the language. I think that not necessarily what people are saying, but the language they're using, which I find is fascinating. And I think it can be quite telling as to where people are, even for yourself. There's not, whilst there's parts, there's no friction between the parts. You can, different parts, which I think it shows I'm going to say an emotional maturity, if you like. It's you can tell that energy can flow between the states, whereas with some it's sort of going, back when I was such and such, and it's a dark place, or it's just different. So I don't know, is that something I suppose you'd be conscious of as you say you've worked on a lot of this?
I've never noticed the change in language as far as visual or auditory. And as far as where we've grown from or grown through, I definitely have this belief that we heal in layers. And so there's, for me, for sure, there's still healing to be done from my marriage trauma, we'll say. And yeah, I'm like so far from where I was that I'll look back, silly Facebook memories come up and I'm like, oh, wow, here's where I was faking it. And this is really interesting to see from this upgraded version of myself. So to me, there's always, maybe not always, because that's a forever word, but there's going to be for a long time layers that continue to pop up, because we heal things when situations arise that show us where we need to be healed. And so we don't always know it. So for instance, in my marriage, he's French, so cooking and wine were a big part of our life. And he's an amazing home cook. And I was a sous chef for a long time in his kitchen. And I would get in a lot of trouble for cutting things wrong. How do you cut carrots wrong? I don't know, but I did, apparently. I cut them all wrong and I ruined dinner many times. And so when I got into a dating relationship where we got to the point where we were going to each other's houses and cooking dinner together, even cooking for my family, my parents, I would have this anxiety rise up while I was, and it was cutting carrots, which is why I always use that specific example, because the first time I realized it was there, I was cutting carrots to make a nice leg of lamb and some roasted vegetables with it. And I was like, holy cow, what is happening here? I am freaking out. And all I'm doing is making dinner. And simply because I'm aware and I'm constantly growing in awareness and paying attention to my growth, I realized, okay, this is related to this. So all I have to do is breathe through it. And then my brilliant sister-in-law came along and said, who cares how you cut the carrots? It doesn't matter. And I said, you're absolutely right. It doesn't matter. In fact, today I'm going to cut them wrong on purpose, because even though it hurts a little to do that, uh, I am going to break free of this pattern today, and then each time I cook. And so now I'll notice that, hey, nothing's coming up for me. Nothing's coming up for me when I'm cooking. When I'm cooking for one person, or when I'm cooking for 4 people, or if I'm cooking for 20 people, which I haven't been able to do in a while now. But we'll get back there. And so I can see that that particular layer is healed. I don't have kitchen trauma anymore. And occasionally I'll get a message from my ex. We only communicate through messages because he cannot look at me. So something will come in, and sometimes there's nothing there. Like there's absolutely no response. And sometimes there's this tightening in my chest, or I start to feel angry, and then I'll know, oh, okay, more to heal there. Like, and it's because I have kids. I probably, if I'm gentle with myself, a lot of this stuff will take as long as it takes for them to grow up, right? Because I'm their mom and want the best. And so Mama Bear comes out a little bit in wanting to protect them from what I experienced from him. So healing is just layered and layered and layered. And we can get really far from a traumatic event or period of time and feel like we're totally healed. And then out of the blue, something else will trigger a deeper layer, which to me, I say, welcome it. I welcome it, because that means I'm releasing more toxins from my body. That means I'm releasing more stored emotion. That means I'm healing on a deeper level. And because I'm a helper, for me, that means, I have greater insight. And one day this will help someone else too. And if it doesn't, it helped me. It definitely is helping my kids. So be open is my motto. Be open to those layers that come up unexpectedly. And for sure, I listened to your prepare for this past video, and you're saying, things, people aren't used to talking about themselves for an hour or two. Things come up and emotions come up, and I'm all like, yeah, strap me in, because I love this ride, even when it feels, and maybe especially when I feel it in my body and I feel like uncomfortable, because that's when I know something cool is happening. Like, spiritually or physically, something's shifting, something is changing, something is making way to be released.
That's beautiful. I mean, in terms of, I suppose, well, first of all, I mean, are you where you're supposed to be now, do you believe?
Oh, absolutely. And always. So always where I'm supposed to be.
What was Tamara's original, mini Tamara? What were you going to do when you grew up? What was the original plan?
I was going to be a Broadway star. I was going to go into theater, and I was going to be a famous singer and actress. And that's all I wanted to do. That was my dream.
It's always interesting, how people, and then what they end up sort of going through, and all the journey that they have, and I mean, you mentioned your grandmother and stuff really at the start. I was going to say, I mean, what sort of major influences and sort of heroes, if you like, have you had in your life, and who really stands out?
Definitely my grandmother. I grew up next door to her. She was born, I think, in 1912, and was college educated and had traveled on her own, and was just like this amazing woman who then married a farmer, basically, and moved to this area of Michigan and had 5 boys, and then opened her own art studio on the property and taught basically until the last days of her life. Her students, actually, it's been 8 years since she passed away. Her students still show up and paint in her art studio because my dad just leaves it's open for them to do that. So every summer she still has students coming and they'll say, oh, we hear Marion's voice. We hear her, and she's all around there. I wear her on my finger every day. This is the ring I inherited from her. And she was just this amazing spirit, who was definitely my greatest influence. Especially if you recall, my home life itself was very chaotic. So to be able to run down the hill and be surrounded by this loving light and get a butterscotch to boot, was amazing. And then my dad is her son, and he has this motto that every day is an adventure. And no matter what's happening, I'll say, how are you today, Dad? I'm perfect. Every day is an adventure. And I know he's not perfect. He's in his mid-70s. Body's feeling hard these days. But his choice is to look at what's right. And that inspires me. And then, of course, there's my mom, who was probably one of I love to call my most challenging relationships my greatest teachers, because she really, it was very hard being her teenage daughter. And once she started to take better care of herself, we live literally right next door to each other now. And it's the best. She's grown so much, and seeing her growth helps me also remember that I'm still her child and to love and respect her as a parent and human being. Because as kids, we think our parents are supposed to be perfect. And when they're not, we're really angry and we might take it out in, unfavorable behaviors. But I got to see my older sibling do that. So I didn't so much. And I get to see this woman who is also not in the very determined way that I have focused on growth, but who has opened to it as those opportunities have arisen. And so she's amazing. I tend to look at my family as my greatest inspirations, but I do have specifically 3 of the most amazing friendships that anyone could ever hope for. And they inspire me every day to keep focused and to remember I'm only human and that I don't have to do this whole growth and evolution and personal development thing perfectly. I get to screw up and I get to be weak. And in fact, it's important to honor when we feel weak and where we are weak. And so they are constant influences in my lives. And then, of course, I have 3 kids, and they are the most amazing, in this sense, positive teachers. I mean, yes, they're challenging. My daughters are teenagers now, so there are plenty of challenges, and they absolutely inspire me to keep growing, always, for them. So if I notice that I've just snapped at one of them, I'm not like, oh, you darn teenager, it's your fault. I'm like, ooh, what did I clean up? What do I need to clean up so that I can be present for you right now? And they're the reason I've devoted myself to yoga, meditation. They are the reason that I kept my eye on this dream of going solo as a speaker and coach and running this as a full-time business, so that I could have the freedom and flexibility to be here for them when they need me, or when they want me, or when I want them.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. A bit of a question that's sort of coming into me there. It's do you think you manifested your husband or your relationship with your husband?
My spiritual viewpoint would definitely have to say yes to that. Yes, absolutely. Number 1 was looking for a way out of an uncomfortable, sticky situation. And then he showed right up, right? The universe gives us what we want, even if it's not quite what we meant. And I had the most amazing journey with him. I lived a life that most Americans especially don't get to live, traveling the world, living in different countries, being exposed to like the most amazing food and wine. And in that, there was so much growth. And then, yes, I believe that one of my life's missions in this life is definitely use your voice. And so I had to lose it to know the value of it. And so on some level, I take full responsibility for what I choose to create in my life, because then I also have the power to change it. And so I will accept full responsibility for choosing to manifest him. And he is an amazing teacher. I've grown so much and continue to grow from the interactions, and everything that comes up for me about him is just more like, okay, there's more dirt. let's clear it off. Let's clean it up. And so, yes, I believe that we do, even if and most likely we wouldn't be consciously aware of what we're manifesting in the way of challenges. I definitely did manifest him.
It's always fascinating. It's a very, again, I think it's a very mature viewpoint, because people sort of say, why would you do such a thing?
Right.
Why
would I manifest this trauma or this traumatic experience? Well,
it's either you're not being specific, or there's a great expression I've heard a couple of times, and it's along the lines of, it's like sometimes good doesn't happen so that great can. And it is that, your point of greatest overwhelm can be your point of greatest learning, the point of greatest insight. But sort of have to go through that dark passage to come through, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
What are you capable of?
Oh. My mom's words from childhood rang through my head there. Anything I set my mind to, Pete. Yes, anything I set my mind to.
But do you set your mind, or do you set your soul?
Oh, you set your heart. You set your soul. So there are levels there, though, right? So because we know we're conscious beings, but only somewhat. So we have to have a multi-layered experience to actually have what we want in life, to achieve what we want in life, to accomplish what we want, to create the life we love. We have to get all of it on board. So heart, soul, mind, body. And it takes making a conscious decision or setting a conscious intention on what we want it to look like. And then getting it so ingrained in us that our subconscious mind gets on board and says, oh yes, we want that too. We're going to stop trying to keep you safe and preventing you from doing that. And then the soul is the driver, though, right? The soul is the driver. So for me, if I feel off course, if I feel that my brain is starting to take over, then I know it's time to like step back in, call the friend who helps me feel centered, or start meditating, or take a walk in nature and find my quiet again, so that I can actually hear. Because all this stuff, all this chatter, even though we think we have to do to get where we want to be, it's the actual being where we're at that gets us there. It's a very strange and funny and wonderfully magical, sometimes frustrating process, which is why people need some help. Even coaches have coaches, and we listen to podcasts and we read books, because someone knows something we don't. And when we're open, we'll be guided to that wisdom. That's my belief.
It's, and I think it's fascinating. You touched on it earlier. It's how almost when you're looking at other people, it's like part of that is a mirage. Part of it is actually you seeing a version of yourself, right? That's,
yes.
And it's having the foresight, the sixth sight, seventh sight, whatever, to actually to be able to actually reflect on that and to process it, as opposed to going, yeah, they need to do work. It's like,
right? Our ego does not want to accept that we might be seeing something we don't like in ourselves, but that's essentially what it is. So when someone is triggering me, I might have that initial knee-jerk response, and then because of the work I've done, because of the work that I do, I I always joke that I have Coach Tam pop up on my shoulder saying, better look at that. You know, take a look, because that's in you, girl. That is not them. What is it triggering in you? What do you need to clean up? And you know, my first mentor, Janet Atwood, who I learned the passion test process from, says, I only see, I'm trying to remember her exact quote, because I tend to mess up. I tend to kill quotes. I see only myself. We'll paraphrase it that way. I see only myself. I only meet anyone. I only meet myself. Like, in anyone I meet, I'm only meeting myself. So whatever I'm seeing in you, whether I like it or not, if I'm like, oh, Pete's this really cool person who asks very good questions, then that's in me too. Or if I were seeing, ooh, Pete asks dumb questions, this is an annoying interview, then really, what am I afraid of learning from you? What else is going on for me that I'm in this irritable state? Because it's most likely it's not you. It's almost never the other person. It's almost always something within us. And it takes a stripping down of the ego to get to this place of being willing to work with that knowledge. Because it's not easy. It's not like manifestation 101. It's like the 500s, right?
going forward, do you set goals? Do you set visions? Are you a visual planner, manifest, journaling, writing crazy? What way is the future look for you, I suppose?
It is definitely in words. So in the process of the passion test, which I learned now 7.5 years ago, I stick with this one because it works. So it works for me. There are tons of ways and tools that work for different people. This one consistently and continually works for me. So I make my list every 6 months or a year of what I want to be, do, feel, or have. And then I'll ask one of my close friends who has gone through the process several times to guide me through my list, because it's a specific way of asking questions. So you go from 10 or 12 things down to your top 5. And as we talked about earlier, we can easily lie to ourselves. But a person who knows you or who's watching you go into your head can go, oh, I see you thinking. Let's go deeper. I'm going to ask you this different question. So which one feels better, this one or this one? And you've got it. Like, I've got to answer with my heart, or it's not valid because it's the heart and the soul that is my driver, in my view. So I do that process once or twice a year so that I'm continually aligning myself with what matters to me right now. But life throws us curveballs sometimes. So things shift and change. And if on my list is to be a world-renowned speaker and author, I just added that author one there, so it's in there somewhere. I think you're inspiring me with your book. Then if something happens, say, knock on wood, one of my parents gets ill, they're in their 70s. I saw this all the time in senior living. Well, then my focus is definitely 100% going to shift to them. They're going to become my number one passion. And then when that's all resolved and I've done what I needed to do in that scenario, then I can shift back to my passion. So it's setting these passions. They're like goals, but they're not goals. So this is what I want my life to look like. Goals are the action steps that I'll take to get there. So I put it in writing. It's always in writing. I've tried to do vision boards. I'm not a visual artist. I like words and sounds. So I will make my own meditations for visualizations, and I write lists, and I have tried different picture versions of these things, and it just doesn't hook my interest. It doesn't keep me focused, but words do. So if I read my list every day, until the point where I'm memorized, and then I keep it there anyway so that I still have awareness on it each day, then I'm going to take action toward that, because part of the process is choosing in favor of your passions. So I've got a choice to make. Someone's given me an opportunity or a decision to make, and I ask myself, okay, will it move me closer to my passions? If it's a yes, then I move forward. And if it's a no, then I set that aside for now. Maybe one day it will move me closer to my passions. But right now, if I'm feeling into my internal guidance system and the answer is no, then I don't do that thing. And then it's learning how to lovingly say no, which is another fun tool.
That's interesting, because that was actually one of my questions. You know, how do you validate a goal or validate a potentially a passion? You know, that it's not sort of the ego in sheep's clothing, or whatever the way you want to phrase it, really.
Well, it could be. I mean, you know, the ego's going to come out here and there, and that's okay. That's human nature. And it really is, but the ego's in your head, not your heart. So if you're really giving yourself over to the process, then you're letting your heart lead. And this can take practice too. So I always say the first time somebody does a passion test, like, you might have some surface stuff there, but stick with it. And 6 months from now, a year from now, deeper things are going to surface. And so you get to these passions, and then what the heck do they mean? What do they look like? How am I going to know I'm there? How am I going to know if I'm a world-renowned speaker? So I create markers to show it. So if, for instance, if I want to go to Detroit, Michigan, which is about 40 minutes from my house, if that's my passion, to be in Detroit, then how am I going to know I'm there? Well, I can see the Renaissance Tower. I can see the Detroit River. I can see Tiger Stadium. I know I'm there because these clear pieces of tangible evidence tell me so. Or someone walks up to me and says, "Welcome to Detroit." So the markers are that next level. Like, what will it look like when you're there? How will you know? How will I know that you're there? If I'm an outside observer, how will I be able to tell? And so that's that next level. And you keep revising those, because even as big as our egos can get, they often still encourage us to play small. And so if I say that I want to be this world-renowned speaker, but in my markers, it says that I'm speaking on stages to 500 people, that's a disconnect. That is my own, you know, low self-esteem, or my upper limit, or just not really truly believing that I can get there. And so then comes the journal, Pete. Then comes the mindset work of, all right, what's going on here? Because this marker doesn't match that passion or that intention. So where do you need to clean that up? Why are you selling yourself short? And so to really dig into what you actually believe, because it's what we actually truly believe that is going to show up for us. Not what we think we want or think we believe, but what we truly believe is what we actually get. So if I want in my head, in my ego, to be speaking to 1 million people, but I only truly believe that I'll ever get to stages of 500, well, then that's what's going to happen. And that's where I'm going to be stuck until I tackle that and work through it.
It's the old adage, isn't it, really? Sort of ask, believe,
Receive.
do, and receive.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
It's that, you know, you can ask till you blue in your face, but if you don't believe it inside yourself, it's not going to happen, right?
Yeah. And then that do part that you mentioned, like, we have to also take action. We can't just sit back and wait for it to happen.
Listen, a number of people, that's the thing. You go ask, believe, receive, and it's like, yeah, you kind of got to turn up too, right? You know, it's like,
exactly. Like, you can consider, you know, if you're a spiritual person and you believe in God or whatever you want to call it, then I believe like we're co-creators. So sometimes Source is in the driver's seat and sometimes I am. And sometimes I'm in the back and sometimes I'm in the passenger seat, but I'm working together with the creative force of the universe. I have to do my part. I have to do my part. I have to also take action. So I set my intention and then I take the actions toward it. And then I also release my attachment to the outcome so that if something better shows up, I'll see it. Maybe I want to be on that stage, but maybe I end up in a nonprofit that goes into small communities instead. And if I had only kept my sights on that big stage, maybe I would have missed out on the most transformative work experience of my life. I would have in the senior living if I had said, oh no, I can't take a job in senior living because that doesn't meet my goal. I would have missed 5 amazing years of learning, growth, development, and love. And I wouldn't have even known it. And looking back, because I do know it, that would have been so sad. That would have been such a loss. I was still actually choosing in favor of my passions because what it breaks down to is that I want to enrich the lives of others. So whether I'm doing that in senior living or helping out my mom's greenhouse once in a while because I go shopping and I see they're busy, then, or whether I'm saying hello to the bus driver, it doesn't really matter. If my purpose is to enrich the lives of others, then I'm doing it in so many different ways. I only have to be willing to notice that it doesn't have to be grand. It can happen on the small scales and stages too.
It's interesting. I mean, are you clear on your overall purpose then? Do you know your purpose is exactly that, really?
I would say for sure that my purpose is to enrich the lives of others. The way that I do it isn't always clear. I change my mind. Sometimes it's in senior living, or sometimes it is at the grocery store, but currently, and for many, many years now, I have had this goal of speaking to bigger, wider audiences. And so I move toward that on a daily basis with the awareness, though, that there could be opportunities that come up that are even better than what I think I want. And so that's where I say, I know for sure that I am here to inspire and enrich the lives of others. And how I do that may look different from time to time. And so I'm not so attached to the how, even though there is definitely a path I want and that I'm currently going down and currently on. But ultimately, as long as I'm making a positive difference in this world, what that looks like doesn't matter so much.
I get that. I mean, it's more, the purpose is more like a mantra, right? It's not necessarily goal defined as such. It can be just, to an open-ended statement, or to be the best version of myself, to live the fullest life, to help and serve to so it doesn't have to be I think a lot of people sometimes get snarled up in that, and think it's, my purpose is to deliver this, it's like, well,
right.
That's a humanistic sort of label, really, to try and do it, when actually we're capable of so much more.
Yeah, and if we're wrapping our purpose up in a job, well, what happens when that job goes away? I mean, so many people experienced this last year, right? If my purpose had been to do fun activities for seniors when COVID hit, that would have been wiped out. Since my focus was enriching lives, I still got to do that every day, even if for a while it was through a simple phone call because I couldn't have events anymore. So, really I think what needs to be clearer for me and for people to really to live that best life is their ultimate reason for being, not the what, but the reason for being. Like, why am I here? What impact do I want to make in this world? What did I choose to come into this particular life for? And, that way, it's like we say, home is where the heart is, right? So wherever you are, you're doing what you're meant to. It doesn't matter what job, what city, what relationship, as long as you're continually showing up with purpose, you get to really make your own meaning from that. That's another gift in this life. You get to determine what the meaning of anything is. Your choice. It's not set in stone. So I determine that my purpose is this meaningful enrichment of the lives of others. And I know one of those tools is by making sure that I'm consistently doing that for myself as well. And then I don't really care what it looks like. Dreams, goals, yes, I do have them. And I'm open to them changing and shifting. Just because they haven't in the last 7 years doesn't mean they won't.
What's your values? Do you set them? Do you have them? Do you know them?
I don't. My number one value is really more like a motto: be a good human. I value honesty. I value self-honesty. I value family and loyalty. I value love. I value authenticity and integrity so that my words, deeds, and actions match up. And I value friendship, but that comes down to all that other stuff too. Love, honesty, and being a good human. Ultimately, that's what I say. Like, as long as you're a good human, that's all right. Everything else doesn't really matter. Just show up and be good.
I always find it interesting. There's a statement that always sits with me, along the lines of your voids are your values. And I don't know, it's sort of, I blow hot and cold on it, and sometimes I think it's probably more a question maybe than a statement. It's like, are your values potentially a void? Which, because I love there, I mean, you talked about, love and joy and things, but I suppose almost to get a bit of a flag when you start talking honesty, integrity, and that side. Do you know what I mean? It's that sort of.
I that can ring true, because those come up for me because I wasn't always in integrity, because I wasn't always honest. So definitely your voids can for sure be your values and not necessarily be voids anymore. Or maybe there's still somewhat I still catch myself lying to myself or withholding something that needs to be said and not using my voice because I'm a work in progress, right? I'm not done yet. I hope I still have another 50 or 60 years. If I were done, then it's time to move on to the next life. So there are still places where I'm not fully living those values, and my willingness to see them means that one day I will, or at least that I'm willing to recognize that I didn't, so that I continue to. Because I would never want to go back to that feeling of being out of integrity and knowing that I'm saying and believing one thing, but doing something different. And when they don't line up, it hurts us. It really, it hurts. It hurts our bodies. We get ill. And even talking about it, I can feel my stomach clench up. I remember that person who was faking it and lying to herself and trying to convince herself of other things. And frankly, being dishonest because I couldn't or wouldn't vocalize what I really wanted and needed. There are lots of reasons for that. I didn't feel safe. And my life would have maybe progressed a lot faster had I just done it anyway, because once I spit it out, things change, right? So even today, I will find myself holding back. I mentioned I'm neighbors with my mother, who I love and adore, and our relationship is amazing now. But there are still times when we have boundary issues, right? And for a while, I might suck it up and I might not say anything, but then I'll feel it festering and I'll have to go and talk. I'm like, I gotta have this conversation with my mom. These difficult conversations are where if they're in my head, then I know I'm still, oh, Tam, there you go. You're falling back to not using your voice. That's not what you're here for. You made a commitment to yourself. And so then I have to go and say, knock, knock, can we have this conversation about boundaries? And here's what upset me, where you crossed it. And here's what I'd love to see. And then she usually just gets mad and cries for a minute, but then later we'll come back and say, you're right, I'm sorry. So we're going to feel discord in our body when we're living from the void instead of the value. And that's okay. It's another compass. It's another way to stay on track or get back on track.
No, it is. It's just it's fascinating. I think the whole thing, you know, just in, you know, sense checking it and appreciating that the, you know, the ego is evolving as quickly as well, you know, and it's kind of going, well, you sort of you find a void, or you find something that needs to work on, but then you come back the next day and it's all been painted over, and it's like, no, there was no void here. Nothing to say.
Right. It's so easy to do. It's so easy. But then it comes back, and it comes back stronger. And so that's what I've learned. Like, the more I avoid it, the bigger the message is going to get. So, and I don't want catastrophic events. I love life. I want to really enjoy it. So the sooner I listen and the sooner I take care of it or clean it up, then the smaller that warning sign or guidepost is going to be. And instead of it being like a year or 15 of my life, it's 5 minutes a day. It's a blip instead of this really long, lengthy experience.
Where do you serve best?
In groups. I serve best in groups. I feel, and I'll say this, I feel the most alive, and I feel like a clear vessel in a group, right? So that it's not just words I've written down that I know I want to say. It's as if some source comes through me in a group setting, and I feel the most alive and on purpose in those settings. I can feel alive and on purpose in this conversation, which I do. This is really fun, and you ask amazing questions and help me dig deeper into my own beliefs. And I truly believe that when we feel like all the way fully on fire, alive, energetic, activated, that is when we're serving our highest purpose. That is when we're most purposeful. And I definitely feel that way on stage. Stage has always been the thing for me since the first time I stepped onto one, which is why I wanted to go into theater at the beginning of my adult life. And now it doesn't matter if it's theater or if I'm singing or if I'm speaking. I know when that aliveness comes through that it's more than me. It's a message for you, for anyone listening, for the people in the room. And I feel like so full of glitter and aliveness in those moments that it's only possible for that to be my purpose.
Wow, it's beautiful. Yeah. Tell me this, what's a guilty pleasure for you?
Wine and chocolate. Love wine and chocolate.
It's always the same. It's generally wine, chocolate, crisps. 95% of the people say that.
Do they?
Okay. What's your go-to on the wine then? Come on.
I like a sparkling wine. So I have right now a champagne taste, but a Prosecco budget. So
Nothing wrong with that.
No, Prosecco's amazing. So I'd like to be drinking Dom every day, but I will take my Prosecco. And you know what? I answered that as my guilty pleasure, but I don't feel that guilty about it.
You can remove the guilt. That's fine.
Yeah, that's
what's
just
your
a pleasure.
Yeah.
I love it. I love one piece of really good dark chocolate after a meal. Just like, I don't need a Snickers bar. That is junk food chocolate. I want one piece of a really good dark chocolate. And if that is with a glass of wine, even better. And that's it. That's my joy. You know, I don't like to drink around my kids because they see it. But I also choose to sometimes have a glass of wine around my kids, because I want them to know that, like, this can be a pleasurable thing and not a problem.
Mm.
So we get to enjoy the things that bring us joy. And if it's really a guilty pleasure, I'm trying to think of one that like I'm embarrassed to admit, because that's what's really a guilty pleasure, right? Okay, I'm going to say it's Taylor Swift. She's my guilty pleasure. I like her music and I wish I didn't. It's like indie alt girl inside of me is like, oh, she's so pop culture. But yeah, in fact, I like almost all of her songs. So she's my guilty pleasure. I don't turn them on purpose, but if they're on the radio, I probably know every word. I'll be singing along. And I'll think, why do I know all these words? This is a really catchy tune. So yeah, we'll go with Taylor Swift as the guilty pleasure and the wine and chocolate as just straight up pleasure.
No, I like that. I was going to ask, what's something that not many people know about you, but I think you probably answered that with Taylor Swift. So
I think I did. I don't think maybe anybody knows that. My kids know I'll sing along, but yeah, I haven't admitted that one before. So thanks for keeping me honest.
Leisure and pleasure. What's it look like for you?
Oh my gosh, this time of year, gardening. I grew up in a greenhouse and that's another place where I actually do feel so on fire, but it's a very different aliveness. It's so inward, right? And I'll forget all time and space exists, and then I'll realize someone will say, "Mom, when's dinner?" Oops, I don't know, because I've just planted 16 rows of leeks or whatever. So that's leisure and pleasure. And also Michigan is so beautiful in the summer. Finally, the weather is being how it's supposed to be. And so I love to get out on a lake and enjoy the sunshine and be with friends. Friends are one of my greatest pleasures in my leisure. And I have my kids half time. So when they're with me, just hanging out with them, if we can get out in the sunshine and play some Frisbee, it's that, or sitting with them and playing a game, laughing with them is one of the greatest pleasures of my life. And yeah, they're such a part of my leisure and pleasure, because I'd almost hang out with, if I had no one else to hang out with in the world, I'd be happy to hang out with my kids. So because they're really cool humans. And I have this big property that I live on, so just to sit outside in the sun and read a book is divine. And okay, here's one more though that I really, 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 really love and haven't been able to do in a long time. So I'm looking forward to this being possibility again. I love karaoke. I love going to a karaoke bar and singing a song and being on stage that way and having fun with friends at a karaoke bar.
What's your go-to? What are you particularly good at belting out?
I do some Peggy Lee, Fever. That's a go-to. And then Aretha Franklin's Do Right Woman, Do Right Man.
Wow, big numbers. Love it. Tell me, if you were to try and summarize your fire in the belly in 1 or 2 words, what would they be?
That is tricky. Follow your own light. Following my light lights that fire in my belly, and doing the things that keep it sparked up and lit. Well, follow your light.
Beautiful. It's 3 words, but I'll let you away with it.
Follow light.
Bad English, but at least it's within the rules. That's okay. Tell me, where can people find out more and follow you, track you down, hunt you down, stalk you, any of the above?
I have been stalked, not literally. So my website is alifeyoulovenow.com. I'm also very present on Facebook and Instagram. And if any of your listeners happen to be local to Detroit Metro, they can also find my group, Create a Life You Love, on meetup.com. And we meet locally, face-to-face, physically distanced, socially connected, having these kinds of conversations. So,
Beautiful.
And my name is pretty unique. So just Google me, you'll find me.
When's your book coming out?
Oh, good question. Let's say 2 years from now, Pete.
Like it. Do you know what it's called yet?
I do. It's been brewing for a long time. It's called The Courage to Leave.
Ooh, very good. I like that.
Thank you. That's one. There's at least 3 in there.
Interesting. Loads. Listen, the final message you'd like to leave with people?
Be who you are. Be who you are, because those cheesy messages you see on social media are true. Like, when you show up as who you are, the people who love you authentically will want more of you. And when you cover over for the comfort of others, you hurt yourself, and you don't get those genuine relationships that make life so beautiful. So just be who you are, and be respectful and be loving and kind as you do so. But just do it, and know you're worthy of being yourself and living authentically. And if that doesn't ring true for you, do the work that gets you there.
Beautiful. Tamara, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you. I appreciate your, sharing your story and all your amazing lessons. So thank you, and until the next time.
Thank you, Mighty Pete. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you.